Do you ever spend too much time on YouTube? Do you ever just go on crazy YouTube rabbit holes to try to become a better artist? Do you ever just browse art videos on YouTube and come across thumbnails like these? Thumbnails that make you go, how is this even possible? How did they even do that? I absolutely must learn the wizardry that will make my stick figure sketch turn into a hot woman with glossy hair and skin texture and folds in the clothes and everything. How are they doing that? Teach me. Well, me too. I also have these moments. I find these types of videos to be so incredibly enticing because it's like magic, but a magic that's accessible to the masses because you get to learn how to do it yourself. And while I am definitely not as good as the artists I just showed on screen, and there are beautiful thumbnails, I have been asked about my rendering process. So in today's video, I thought I'd show you all the recipe to my secret sauce. My very secret sauce that is not secret because I'll be teaching you, but it's the secret sauce that is rendering illustrations. And here's the important part. I don't do line art. Woo! Hello, it's post speed paint me, who's decided to show you exactly how I organize my drawings. I want to slow down the process a little bit. So I'll be showing the full speed paint throughout this video and explaining the steps as I go, but I wanted to break everything down here at the start because the speed paint will be playing at like 40 times speed, and that's way too fast to see all the details of what's going on. For this portion here, I'm going to focus on a different illustration, this one. Which I made for Art Fight. It's kind of messy, but it still gets the point across, so I'm gonna use it. And my process remains the same no matter what I'm painting, so anything that I say here can be applied to anything else I draw. My drawing process is split into 3 steps, which you can see in these folders here labeled character. We have the flats. Well, first we have the line art, and it's not really line art, it's really just a sketch. So we have the sketch folder, we have the flats folder, and we have the render folder. And those are the 3 steps that I use for pretty much anything. I don't actually do real line art because I think it's annoying, and I try not to do it if I can help it. And I usually don't record with layers showing, but as you can see here, I've pulled them out. So let's just break them down. So the first thing I have is a couple of preliminary really light sketches right here. And I did do some planning in my sketchbook for this one, so it's not like I just conjured this out of nowhere. And then from those sketches, I created this sketch here. Oops, gotta hide everything. This sketch here. From this sketch, I created, and you can see it's broken up into 3 sketches. We have the hair layer, the sword layer, and everything else. I really should name my layers, but I don't always, so that's why things can get a little disorganized. And then below this sketch folder here, we have the flats folder, which is just for flat colors. The first thing I do is I make a layer with just one color here, and I just fill out the entire thing. I'm gonna hide this glow layer because that's kind of confusing. Okay. So we have this one just flat color layer, and then over it I paint the various elements. So we have the armor. That's nothing apparently. The other part of the armor, hair, gold bits, and then I did some preliminary shading because I didn't want to go start with the overpainting just yet, so sometimes I do this layer, sometimes I don't. Really depends on how confident I'm feeling in the piece, and I guess I just needed a little bit more detail to add here while I could still see the line art before I moved on to overpainting. And the overpainting step is the crazy step. It turns this into this. And I don't really have good advice for it. My advice is just go. But I'll show you the various steps that I do. Usually I start by rendering the face. So you can see this layer here is just called render because I tend to overpaint on the same layer. So I just kind of went through and added details where I thought they should be. Some shinies on the armor, just kind of overpainting things where the lines weren't exactly clear. Then here's the face. I added a little bit more definition, better shading to the face. I added some freckles, a little bit more definition to the edges of the face. Here's where the hair came in. I added the little hair bits, and then some extra shading, and more hair bits. And yeah, that's pretty much the whole thing. We go from this to this to this to this. And that's my three-step process. It's actually pretty simple, it just can take a lot of time. So now we can actually take a look at this full body drawing here of the speed paint that I'm going to show you. Here I actually tend to erase layers as I go, the layers that are under it. So the sketch and flats you'll see here aren't what the sketch and flats looked like when I first made this, but it's still a pretty good idea, so I will show y'all what I got going on. First here we have this main sketch for real copy. I go through a lot of iterations of sketches, I guess. And it's a bit erased because I erased it as I was creating the render. And then we have flats. Once again, very sparse because I'm assuming I erased parts of it. You'll see throughout the speed paint what the actual flats look like. And then the render. Oh, and then the render. And the render here is very long because this piece had a lot of things going on. This entire thing here is the render folder. Partially because it's like I had little things like this really detailed book you can see here, which I paint separately and then I kind of added it in. We have lots of patterns. So some of this makes sense. It's like, okay, I rendered the skin, so there's the skin layer. I rendered the hair feathers, there those are. Here's the hair. Just, you know, sometimes I don't draw the hair at the beginning. Shirt looks like this. Pants look like that. Skirt looks like that. Pattern for the skirt looks like that, and so on and so forth. So that's the basic process. The layers, I'd say layer organization is important, but only in the three main categories. Pretty much, if you want to paint like this, you have a flats folder with all your flat colors in it. You have a sketch layer or a sketch folder. In this case, it's just one layer. And then you paint over the top of it in what I call the render layer. So yeah, that's the very basics of how my process works. And now let's get into the speed paint and see how I did it in real time. Woohoo! So here we are in the speed paint. This piece here was commissioned by an awesome person over on Artistry, which is the platform I use for commissions, and they wanted a full character sheet of their character Embry. We decided that the layout for this piece would be a full body drawing, a portrait, a what's in my bag type thing to show some extra items, and then a couple more additional elements. Since the full body portion is the centerpiece for this commission, this video and my explanations will focus mainly on that. To be honest, I forgot to record the painting process for a lot of the other what's in my bag type items, so if a fully rendered spellbook just spawns onto the page randomly at some point, don't worry about it. It's just there now. So the first thing I do is make a sketch. It doesn't even have to be a good sketch. It just has to show you where the lines are. I have shaky hands, so honestly it's never really that good for me. The important part is that you block out where the important things are supposed to go. I do want to make it clear that I don't go into projects like this completely blind, so I'm not conjuring this design out of nowhere. Especially with commissions like this, I do a fair amount of planning so that there are less edits to do later on. In this case, I had already drafted possible outfits and possible color schemes and talked to my client about which they liked best, so from there it's much easier. I'm an artist, don't get me for the grammar, but from there I can pretty much just go into the actual character sheet without having to do a crazy amount of planning. Based off the commissioner's description of Embry, we decided to draw them as a sort of alchemist, explorer, mage, with a lot of emphasis in their design on showing off the tools of their trade. I obviously can't resist a good belt, never can, so Embry has a nice tool belt with several pouches for whatever ingredients they need on hand, and a holster for their spell/recipe book. I also added some little thongs attached to several of the pouches and to a spot on the shoulder where Embry keeps little potion vials. They've also got lore attached to them with phoenixes and rebirth, so there are a couple feathers throughout the design. As Embry travels often and also deals with potentially hazardous materials, they've got sturdy and practical clothing that doesn't reveal too much skin. The commissioner wanted to incorporate jewel tones, so we decided to use palette 4, which is my initial planning, which has some deep reds and blues interspersed with some different shades of brown, which was nice because I got to LARP at drawing leather for once. I don't often do that. Other than that, I knew I wanted to incorporate some sort of leaf/vine related pattern somewhere in the piece and add gold trim and gold hardware wherever necessary, but those details don't really start coming in until the overpainting section. I just knew in my head that it was going to happen in the future. Overall, the first 2 steps of my painting process are very simple. Not necessarily easy, but at least they're simple. First, you make a sketch or two, and then second, in a layer under that sketch, you color everything in. It's what you first learn when you start to draw. Draw, color in the lines, that's it. For those flat colors, I would recommend that you color every element on a different layer because that makes it easier if you need to change a color later on. So for example, let's say you have the cloak colored in on one layer, the hair on another, the skin on another, etc. If you decide that the base color for the cloak is too saturated or too dark or the wrong color entirely, it's really easy to fix that because it's separated from everything else, so you can just color correct that one element and everything else will stay the same. I would definitely recommend you get your colors nailed down before you start overpainting though, because once you've started the process of overpainting, it can be really difficult to change the color of just one thing without having to change the whole piece. The other thing I occasionally do with my flats layers is I add a little bit of airbrushing on places where there's a lot of flat color. So for example, the skirt cloak area got some extra different tones of blue because it can be really boring to just have one blue tone. Of course, this might get covered up in the overpainting, so it's not necessarily something that you have to do because it's really a toss-up as to whether it'll appear in the final product, but I like to do it because then I'm not looking at a flat color the whole time. And then from there, it's pretty much onto the render, and I will tell you straight up, I am not a very organized person when it comes to the render. When it comes to the flats, I get it. You keep everything on different layers so that you can make edits early on so you don't have to do them later on when you're already too lost in the sauce. But with the render, I would recommend that you render everything on separate layers so that you don't have to keep dealing with overlaps. For example, you see the belts here are overlapping with the skirt, so obviously you want the belt layer to be over the skirt layer because the belts lay over the skirt. I sometimes do that and I sometimes don't. I really, when it comes to rendering, I think it could be really intimidating, so I always just start. So long as I have started rendering, that's a win. It doesn't matter where I start, it doesn't matter how organized I am with the layers, just so long as I start, it's good. So in this case, I was really intimidated by the belts because there was a lot of hardware and a lot of details that I was going to have to do. So I started with the belts and I worked out a little bit of detail before hopping around. And I do tend to hop around. I am an ADHD renderer, which is to say that I only work for 45 minutes at a time and I work on the thing that interests me the most at the time. And I can tell you that that thing tends to be like this cloak area with a lot of fun folds, skin, or hair. In this case, I actually did the skin and the hair last because I thought they were going to be the easiest for me to do, so I wanted to start with the harder stuff. But in most cases, if I see something that looks like it's going to be really fun to paint folds with, I will start there. I'm just always into it. When it comes to actually how I paint and how I choose colors for the overpainting, there are 2 things that I would recommend. And I'm not an expert by any means, so definitely if you have other strategies that work for you, do those. You know, this is not the only way to do things. The first thing is look at reference. Please, if you don't know how to draw something, look at reference. Clothing, folds especially, I am not the best painter, I am not the best color picker, so when I'm lost in something, especially with those belts, I looked at a lot of like Renaissance fair belts on Pinterest to sort of get the right colors and get where the stitches would be and where the seams would be and everything like that. Looking at real life reference can be really, really helpful, and also maybe give you ideas for things you hadn't thought of with little extra elements you want to add. The other thing I do is when I paint over the flats, I choose a brush with low opacity. Not super low, but low enough that I can blend colors together so that I have some dark colors that clearly stand out from the flat color. So you can see on the cloak I've got this sort of dark red, this dark maroon that definitely stands out from the lighter red of the base color. But because it's slightly opaque, so it's slightly opaque, which means it's also slightly transparent. So because it's slightly transparent, it blends nicely into that lower color. For actually choosing colors, I am not the best at that. I usually just eye drop the base color, and then I choose a darker color within the color wheel. I just basically move diagonally to the right of that color, so I go a little bit more saturated and a little darker. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this. I think, for example, the cloak could have really looked nice with some purpley tones in there or some blue tones. And then vice versa with the skirt, it could have looked good with some maybe red maroon tones in the really dark parts, because then you're adding in parts of other elements of those colors into other parts of the piece, so it looks overall cohesive. This video isn't really about color picking, it's about my overall process, and color picking is definitely not a strength of mine. It's something I really want to look forward to working on in the future and put more effort into. But just be aware that colors, getting a low opacity, so a slightly transparent brush can be really helpful for blending your colors together when you do overpaint. Now, finally, I want to talk about something I probably should have started with, which is why you would want to overpaint in the first place versus just cell shading. And really, there's no reason. One is not better than the other. It's really just a personal preference of what you like as an artist. For example, here's a drawing from 2017 that I did. This probably says a lot about who I was in 2017, but you can see it's very cell shaded, no overpainting whatsoever. The line art is there, the flats are there is some cell shading. And with a piece like this, you don't need to overpaint because there's strong line art, and it's just the style that I've chosen for this piece. Now, I don't cell shade anymore. I really do like to overpaint, and the reason I like to overpaint is partially a stylistic reason. I think my style is, if not realistic, at least more realistic. I have tried to escape the anime jail that I was in 2017, which was the very anime style, which rewards cell shading and strong line art, and I'm not really good at either of those things, so I decided to move on. And I prefer a style of painting that is much softer, much more blended. You can still see that there is some line art in the face or some sketches in the face, so I'm not all the way there in terms of realistic painting, and I probably never will be. I think I do like a mix of some lines, but mostly soft painting. And that's why I learned how to overpaint. I wanted to try this sort of style that focuses less on line art. So that's just a final note about style. Really, this is just the style that I happened to develop over the course of time. This is the strategies that I developed over the course of drawing for a long time. And I would never say that this is the style that you should use, that everyone should use. Obviously, art is about what you want to create and how you would like to create it, and I've seen so many other artists who paint in a completely different way than me. Some people start with colors, no sketches at all, just silhouettes. That is crazy. And I think those styles are really awesome and super cool, and I always wonder how they do it, and there's obviously something to be learned from those people as well. So I'm just trying to say that what I've shown here is how I do it, but it's not an end-all be-all, and there's there's absolutely things I can improve on. But overall, that's my render style. Here is the finished piece. I think it's super, super cute. I kind of went balls to the wall on this commission, to be honest. I included so many things, and I really like the way it turned out because I've always wanted to make this sort of D&D style character sheet, and I'm so glad I finally did. But yeah, I hope you liked this video. I hope it was helpful. I hope you learned something from it. If you have any questions, please comment. I love to yap. But that's all I got for this one. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!